Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to take a minute to introduce the panelists. We've got Olga Feldmeier, who is co-founder and CEO of Smart VALOR, and Ed Moncada, who is CEO and co-founder of Blockfolio. So welcome, Olga and Ed.
Thank you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so I've put together a couple questions that we can go over so that we can, educate some people in the audience. So first of all, what are your favorite techniques for achieving diversification in digital asset portfolios?
Yeah, I mean, achieving the, you don't have things in the crypto ecosystem like ETFs or mutual funds. To be honest, I mean, I'm just mostly looking kind of at like some of the larger, broader narratives in the space. What are the real use cases for blockchain? Store value. Just kind of like coming up with a list of ones that I think and probability of like that specific sort of, I would say, sector that's going to form, how viable it is and how important it'll be in the future, and like and then just kind of look to try to find the top 2 or 3 players in that specific niche, that I think are likely going to come out on top, and take positions in them. I kind of view this a lot more like, in a lot of ways, I feel I tend to feel like I treat this differently than traditional equity investments. I treat it a lot more like startup investing, right? And definitely want to be fairly well hedged and diversified in this space, because the risk profile is so much higher in a lot of the cryptocurrencies that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, that does make perfect sense.
Exactly. So maybe just a little bit in terms of introduction. So my name is Olga Feldmeier. I'm CEO and co-founder of Smart VALOR, a digital asset exchange platform for staking, trading, brokerage, and custody based here in Switzerland. So basically, when you talk about the diversification of crypto portfolio, there are several things you can do. What I currently recommend to our customers, not only on exchange side, we also have something we call managed accounts, which is basically kind of like wealth management form of crypto management service. So what we currently recommend is basically not just look into simple exposure on cryptocurrency side, something that we all refer to as buy and hold, but also for investors who invest in sums, let's say starting with 100K and more in the range of 500K, so $500,000, it's good basically to cut it into 3 parts, right? So one part is this buy and hold. You just buy whatever cryptocurrencies you believe in. For a lot of people, it's Bitcoin, and this is pretty passive strategy. The second part is more kind of like active strategy. And here, for a lot of people and investors in this space, the good alternative is actually hedge funds, right? If you look at the performance of hedge funds over the last several years, there are quite a good examples of people of hedge funds, that managed to mitigate the risks when the risks were big, and on the other side to give certain exposure and enable investors to make a very good return. So that's kind of like hedge fund part, right? And the last part is basically venture capital investment. So this is, outside of the cryptocurrencies, this is investing in protocols, in new DeFi networks, and new infrastructure projects. So this is actually not a cryptocurrency investment, right? It's just venture capital investment in companies that build on blockchain technology, right? And those 3 parts, they're very different and need very different approach. But interestingly, what we've seen now through the crisis, like the last 3 months, For example, on Smart VALOR, we have tokenized gold. So it's Paxos Gold, PaxG. It's actually the only one regulated physical gold product out there as a token. And we've seen quite a significant uptake during March and February, March and April. So those 2 months, a lot of people, you know, as the queues build up on the streets, people wanted to buy physical gold. So we saw quite an uptick in interest. People just basically diversifying this, you know, super crypto exposure, very concentrated positions into something absolutely on the opposite, digital tokenized gold.
Okay. So I'd like to get, that's certainly interesting. I'd like to get into the next question. So at this point, I'm wondering what key metrics would you tend to look at when you're determining which digital assets or projects to include in a portfolio?
Ed, you want to start?
I'll let you start on this one.
Okay, so look, again, you know, this is, you cannot just speak generally about crypto. It's very different investments, right? So when you talk about direct exposure to cryptocurrencies, right? Well, the key metrics is, of course, you know, how well you kind of track the market, right? And how well you replicate what you have there with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and so on. And maybe if you're a little bit more sophisticated investor, how well do you hedge your position? You know, now we have finally the world of derivatives and futures and options, right? So there is a lot of stuff you can do there. And us as a manager, like if we manage your account, right, we basically measure our performance to lead in cryptocurrencies, right? How well were able to give you the same returns that you would, you know, gain with buy and hold, but on the other side, protecting you and your portfolio from this downdraw scenarios as we had them in March, right? So this is just with crypto. You know, with hedge funds, it's kind of like similar. You know, you benchmark against the development of cryptocurrencies. But this is like when you start to do that, right? So you benchmark how good my hedge fund we selected for a customer was performing in comparison to just buy and hold, for example, right? So this gets a little bit complex because, I mean, guys, look just at 2018, right? What happened in 2018? We had this crazy bull run, right? Like hitting 20,000. Then the next year was nuclear winter and we went to, I don't know what, like at the end of the year, 4,000, right? So if you just measure the performance within a year, right? We lost like really, average investor lost like, you know, 80% of money or 70% of money. And in this time, hedge funds that managed to make like at least 30%, right? Not lose your money, managed to make 30%. That was already a brilliant performance. Now, looking further down into 2019, okay, that was the year where, you know, Bitcoin did amazing, right? And crypto hedge funds did just like, I don't know, in best case, like 30%, 40%. So you would say, well, you know, it's not so great in comparison to what Bitcoin performance was. But remember, this is, you know, much more hedged position than just a direct exposure to cryptocurrencies, right? So I think the benchmark is again very different here. And with venture capital investments in the company, what is a benchmark? Well, you know, can you make it as Andreessen Horowitz and make a lot of money with your venture capital investment? Can you benchmark yourself against them? If you do, you're pretty amazing, right? So it's a kind of different combination of different things.
Yeah, I look at a lot of different things when I'm looking at kind of metrics when I'm thinking about what to invest in, like what digital assets to include in my portfolio. Like I mentioned before, I'm actually looking at different sectors in the space. Ones that I think are viable uses of blockchains, you know, whether it's store of value, smart contract platforms, anonymous cryptocurrencies, data ownership, tokenized voting. These are sort of some of the sectors I look at. Other things I look at when kind of trying to figure out, like, you know, how they're going to perform. I look at, you know, the amount of developer interest that there is, like a developer ecosystem. that's surrounding these investments, these cryptocurrencies. Looking at adoption, these are sort of, I would say, some of the base fundamentals that I'm looking at in determining this. I kind of see all these as they're going through hype cycles, these long-term boom and bust cycles. I don't really try not to pay attention too much into that. I'm just more thinking about, like, in the future world, 10, 15 years from now, which ones of these are really going to matter, right? And how do I get exposure in those in a diversified way so that I'm not necessarily trying to pick the absolute winner, but kind of maybe like I mentioned before, the 2 or 3 that I think are likely to win, and in each of these groups, and I sort of weight them based upon which one of these narratives I think is most feasible.
Okay. Definitely, you brought up some excellent points there, emphasizing, the existence of hype cycles is extremely important, because that is the sort of thing that has essentially hijacked the attention of a lot of market observers over the years. I mean, that's one of the things that has drawn a lot of people to the whole cryptocurrency sector in the first place. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bitcoin was originally something that was advocated by libertarians and technologists and cryptographers, and then it started to become more mainstream, and then it experienced astronomical gains, and then retail investors started jumping in. Of course, if all these people, jump on the bandwagon, we don't know how long they're going to stay on the bandwagon. So yep. I think, that's an excellent point. You need to look at what's actually going to be around 10 to 15 years from now. So, all right, fabulous. Excellent points. Okay, so drilling down a little bit, I know you both got into different metrics you look at. Ed, you mentioned fundamentals. Do you have any go-to data sources that you use when you look to diversify your portfolio?
I'm kind of, to be honest, I mean, there's just so much, it's so fragmented where you can get info on what's going on. Some great places to collect, to kind of dig into data. Masari is pretty great, collecting and obviously for pricing data, I use Blockfolio. But looking at like developer activity, there's you can look at GitHub repositories. I mean, there are people that kind of in the Twitter sphere that are kind of aggregating this information and spitting it out from time to time. I sort of feel like there's still no go-to place where I'm just grabbing everything. I feel like I'm just kind of looking under a lot of rocks a lot of times.
Yeah. So this is what I also confirm, today you have a lot of sources for trading, all the different, chart analysis, just look at TradingView, right? It expanded into a multitude of opinions and chart analysis, right? And there are some very good paid services, but they're more pricey if you run a fund. But in general, I also love Blockfolio. Great job, Ed.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What else? Is there anything you can tell me about your favorite allocation strategies that you haven't already gotten into? I mean, I know we got into, we've gotten into the different metrics, some of the benchmark. I mean, we got into the fundamentals, data sources, stuff like that. Can you shed some light on your allocation strategies?
I'll let Olga go first on this one.
Well, again, we manage wealth of a lot of customers and a lot of different, investors of different size and shapes, right? And I think there is not just one fits all, right? It depends very much on investor preferences, right? So somebody, for example, who has a super conservative portfolio on the other side, outside of crypto, let's assume, what do we see? Typical case would be, somebody who is 95% invested in real estate and ETFs and stocks of leading companies and so on. So super conservative traditional investment portfolio, and was just this 5% 100%, they're in crypto. So for this type of investor, what is the allocation strategy? They actually don't need one because, they are overall so well diversified and in their, within the asset class allocation, right? So for this kind of clients, okay, simple buy and hold or grayscale fund, that's totally enough, right? For somebody who is more like us, right? So the most of our wealth is in crypto, right? And whereas like 5 years ago, just sitting on a bunch of pile of Bitcoins was fine, So today the situation fundamentally changed, right? And it's actually amazing that it changed, right? Because now it's not just Bitcoins, there is a whole industry being built on this technology and other technologies where, blockchain is just, part of the puzzle, and they also apply AI and so on. But amazing thing for us that all of a sudden we kind of like traditional people that came from Bitcoin, we turn into venture capitalists, right? We start to look at, teams and, and development resources and who is supporting and investors and potential of this technology in combination with all the other technologies. So it gets very excited, right? And in terms of like, and here is the question is like, are you like basically from the, technology background, like when you look at the project and you look at, I don't know, Kyber network and you look at how their DeFi protocol works, like, do you understand this stuff? If yes, well, the best strategy is just look, deep dive into the project, look what they're building, understand how promising is what they're doing, right? But again, if you're not this type of the person, if you're a banker, right? My favorite example from Switzerland. So what do? Well, in that case, you have also amazing choice of venture capital funds from A16Z to Pantera and Multicoin Capital. And there are just like pretty amazing collection of teams, that build a very specific technical expertise in selecting the best projects, right? So I think it's very, very individual, your approach, depending on your other assets and depending on your personal, knowledge and expertise, industry you work in. So
yeah, I agree with Olga. I mean, it's a like a clear line, I think, in the crypto ecosystem. These people are very knowledgeable. They're sort of technophiles that come in and deeply start digging and understanding a lot of the protocols and kind of what they're trying to accomplish. And then I have a number of people who contact me from, outside the crypto space that are trying to, first get into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And often they'll ask me, what should I invest in? Typically my general answer is just like, just put money in Bitcoin and don't worry about the other things, because it's just like, they're not prepared for the swings that you have here. And I don't really feel like fielding, 20 calls from this whenever the bull or bust markets are happening. But that said, oftentimes, I'll just say, or take a look at the top 10 in coin market cap and, maybe put some small percentage in those, to have like, a slightly riskier kind of, a portfolio. And then, yeah, I think it's just most people when they come in here, it's just a fire hose of information to even wrap their head around Bitcoin and then blockchain and then all the other uses of blockchain, right? And so it can be pretty overwhelming. That said, my personal allocation strategy, like to many people's surprise, I don't hold that much crypto, just because Blockfolio, which is my primary focus, is basically a bet on the entire ecosystem, right? And so I'd have to, I just probably, I focus a little bit, I know it's not the question, but I end up focusing a lot more on building the product that makes it easier for other people to track their, portfolios and how well their strategies are working, rather than, doing it myself all the time. So.
Yeah, and I think, guys, like the exciting development that we see now, this is actually the thing that we used to call tokenization several years ago, right? So tokenizing digital assets, right? Basically digitalizing, issuing digital securities that are, backed by real assets, right? And it can be real estate. You see already today, from Brazil to US, a lot of real estate is being tokenized. And you see gold, like, what we did in March on Smart VALOR platform. And I think it's pretty amazing because it's kind of like, it's even demonstration of certain, power balance shift, right? So we used to be just crypto, and if you have a wallet at crypto exchange or I don't know, any crypto wallet, you can hold only crypto, right? So this is changing, right? For example, now in Smart VALOR you can hold crypto, BTC, whatever, and you can hold gold, and you will be in I'm pretty sure in 3 years' time we meet and we talk, and then you will be able to hold on the same ledger or uh, digital asset exchange, real estate and company shares, and the whole world, right? Everything is going to be tokenized. Everything will be digitalized. And so for us and for the younger generation, for people that are now in their 20s and they never invested in stock market, they just came to this place and their first investment happened to be crypto, right? So these people will never open a bank account. They will never open a trading account at TradeStation or something, right? They are already in crypto, and the products and all the financial services will come to them, right? So I think we will see a lot of diversification in our crypto space in the next several years.
Sounds good. That sounds pretty reasonable. So I guess I know you mentioned that a lot of people are coming into space, and they've never invested in the stock market before. And going forward, all these different things will be tokenized. Like all these, I mean, by different things, you mean different assets, right? Like, real estate and other kinds of assets. So for these people who aren't even going to set up a bank account and might even not invest in the stock market, I mean, I think it might be good for them to have some basic education on the subject. So I guess what I'm wondering right now is what in particular should crypto investors look out for when creating a diversified portfolio? And this is aimed more toward people who are just getting involved with things. Are there any pitfalls they should avoid or like common mistakes? I mean, I know Ed, you mentioned hype cycles, so I think that would be a fabulous example of something to watch out for, at least.
Yeah. I mean, so many people are always buying the top, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm typically like, when I'm things to look out for. I mean, it's just there's so much going on in the crypto space. There's so much action and activity. It's so easy to get sucked into so many different areas. I think one of the hard things to do sometimes when you really get into crypto is just to be focused. Like I said, and when I look at my portfolio, like I'm really, for the most part, like like I am mostly invested in Bitcoin and the crypto that I do have, and I would say that like I'm just kind of like if I'm diversifying, I'm just trying to outperform the Bitcoin investment that I have, right? And I think some of these are like emerging niches within the cryptocurrency space that are going to go through massive growth spurts as they kind of realize the potential of that specific niche, right? And we've kind of seen that in the like smart contract platforms. We've seen that in some of the other areas of the space, but it's just like it's sometimes the space it's hard to stay focused. There's so much going on. So
yeah, and it looks like the problem is it looks so simple, and you kind of like at the beginning you're watching the prices and you think like, oh, okay, so I got this one right. I would buy here, I would sell there. There's a news, so obviously following this news, the price falls down. So there's China news, it goes down. There's positive China news, it goes up. So on the surface, sometimes it looks so easy. And I think what happens that a lot of people then say like, oh, okay, I got it, I figured this out. So, and they start to trade and they start to do mistakes. And in some cases, they start to trade with huge leverage, right? I mean, Chinese exchanges, Binance, they enable like 100%, 100, multiple 100 leverage. And this is where it gets like really, really dangerous and risky, because if you haven't been a trader, if you don't understand this market, like you can lose a lot of money, right? And I think this is kind of like the problem, this underestimation. There's even a joke going around. It goes like, if you want to make 1 million in trading crypto, like how to do it? Well, start with 10 million.
Yeah.
So I think, to all the young people that just join the space and they don't have financial backgrounds, they don't know much about crypto, I would just recommend don't trade, don't go to buy derivatives or do this crazy stuff. Just buy your half a Bitcoin and sit on it quietly because you have time, right? It's like, with wealth management. I used to work for UBS in wealth management, right? You say, well, the younger you are, the more risky assets you can afford, right? And when you turn older, you need to shift into more bonds and like boring stuff where you sure will not lose money. So look at crypto, look at Bitcoin. Of course, there is still a huge risk that, all of this might not realize as we expect. But again, if you're young, just buy it, sit on it 10 years and you will be fine, right? You don't need to, become a hedge fund and play cool trading unless you want to impress your girlfriend, right?
I would add one last thing. I'd say buy Bitcoin, diversify modestly, and never short anything for like the next 2 years. You'll be all right.
Exactly. That's good advice. Zero leverage.
So what did you say? Buy Bitcoin, don't short anything.
No, buy Bitcoin, diversify modestly, and don't short anything for like the next 2 years.
And don't leverage. Don't leverage too much.
Yeah, it sounds like those sound like some pretty solid takeaways to me. Okay, so I mean, I think we've gone over a lot of different things that I was looking to go over. I guess another thing we could potentially go over is in terms of investing in different projects. I mean, are there any projects in particular that you think are great examples that people have invested in? Not necessarily like which projects should people invest in so much as, like, are there any projects in particular you think have been great investments? Not necessarily in that their tokens skyrocketed in price so much as that they're good bets if somebody's playing the long game.
Yeah, I can say just from my personal experience, because I am from banking industry and, we're building ourselves a quite exciting venture here. And I'm looking at a lot of different fintechs. Well, for me, they are fintechs. That's the old word. The new world is more kind of like DeFi, right? Decentralized finance applications. So I invested in several there, small amounts because nobody knows. For now it's not yet certain how the end game will play out, right? So DeFi is definitely interesting. Apart from that, well, on Smart VALOR, we have done the private sale for NIA Foundation. So NIA Foundation, that's another contester to Ethereum, another promising blockchain protocol project. They raised 21 million. Was also participation of Andreessen Horowitz, right? And we conducted the private sale on our platform for investors. I think that's also like you should definitely have some exposures in the protocol space, right? Layer one. And again, this is not a financial advice. This is just a personal experience, right? So I think you want to have like this, a combination of must-have things, right, like infrastructure, right, and cryptocurrencies, and some additional things that you understand, that you personally have like deep understanding than the rest of the people. Right. So that's quite a personal advice, not advice.
Yeah,
just information.
Like I mentioned before, I kind of look at niches. Like I kind of group these things together. Like for Bitcoin, it's really store of value. I'm not looking at it as digital money necessarily that's going to compete with Venmo or PayPal. But I do believe in store of value. Like having a Swiss bank account in your pocket is a 10x better experience for most people than flying out to Switzerland and opening up a bank account. Or for remittances is actually there's some value there. I would say that I'm looking at smart contract platforms and looking at in on cryptocurrencies. I think DeFi space has been pretty hot for like the last 8 months to a year. Like the valuations in the DeFi sector for startups have been extraordinarily high. So it kind of makes me feel like, you know, it's probably going to cool off a little bit. It just keeps roaring. I mean, and then, you know, data ownership, I think, is really interesting to me. You know, I think it's a really good use case for a blockchain, and I think there might be some tokens that actually do kind of advance that area. So if I was going to look at something where I think it's kind of still very early on, that hasn't, like, you know, there's still a lot of traction for it to gain ahead of it. I'd say like data ownership is something that's really interesting to me right now. You know, and then I'd say there's you know, tokenized voting governance is something that's interesting too, but I still think that's quite a ways out, even though you're starting to see some developments in the space around that. I think it's going to be, I think there's a lot of pipes that need to be built for that to really become something that's compelling. So those are the things I would say.
Okay. So if you were to look at, say, the different distributed ledger technologies, obviously blockchain is the most hyped DLT. It's probably has the most widespread use, but obviously there are other DLTs too, like there's IOTA's Tangle, for example, and then we have Hedera's Hashgraph.
Yep.
And do you have any thoughts on like the adoption of, say, I don't know how much adoption Hedera's Hashgraph has been able to achieve, but I mean, obviously, institutions around the world have been looking into blockchain, and it seems like several institutions have also looked into IOTA's Tangle. Do you have any thoughts on the adoption of those two distributed ledger technologies?
I'm not as familiar with IOTA's Tangle, but I would say like Hedera Hashgraph seems to have like a lot of really strong relationships, enterprise relationships, and getting a lot of participation from the likes of like IBM and Google, that kind of caliber of enterprise company, which is pretty impressive. You know, I mean, if you've used Hedera Hashgraph, I think it's blazingly fast, and people say it's not decentralized. It'll be interesting to see kind of how it unfolds. I mean, maybe it does have like very centralized features right now, but I imagine that over time, like it's just a problem that they're going to continue to solve. I don't really see it as a permanent feature. Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know IOTA that well, so I can't really comment on that. You know, and I think you know, adoption of some of these is like, Hedera is very interesting to me, and I think you know, the high throughput and the speed of the transactions are interesting, but it really comes down to like compelling use cases that are going to be, you know, how are they going to deliver like a 10x better experience than, you know, technologies that are traditionally being used to solve the same problems. And I still don't have a lot of visibility into that. So.
Yeah, I think this is kind of like what is a little bit disappointing currently, you know, that, you know, we all invested in those new upcoming protocols like 2 years ago. You know, EOS was once so great and so big, and you know, the sad reality is that actually there was analysis of some university and some research reports done on this topic that basically 80% of transactions are run by very limited amount of participants, right? 10, 20, right? So it's not really, you know, DOT. It's not really, you know, broad ecosystem and, you know, networks that would sustain 51% attack. It's far away from that, right? And I think like fundamentally today, well, we're just too early. It's early days. The technology will develop there. And what makes me kind of like, you know, hopeful is cases that you hear like from time to time, like for example, I don't know, several weeks ago, you were speaking about Theta, right? So it's a video streaming platform where Google joined in the partnerships to run also the nodes on the Theta network. And what is great is that it really has value straight away today. So, when you stream a video and your network is poor, right, you could use the networks of people around you, right? And this network enables exactly that, right? And maybe if you don't realize it when you look at this company, it's for the first place. And the latest, you hear the news that, Google is supporting and running the nodes of this network, you kind of like, oh, wait, like, looks like something is really happening there. So I think we're getting there. It's slow progress. And I think the real winners we will see in 2-3 years, the earliest. And until then, we just, put our chips on the little horses and hope that, that horse will be the winning horse.
Okay. I think that we are almost out of time at this point. So I would like to wind this down. Are there any last points that anybody would like to make before we sign off?
Just buy Bitcoin.
And hold it.
That's it.
No matter what.
Buy Bitcoin and hodl it.
Exactly.
Fabulous.
This
Okay.
one we agree.
Okay. So I'd like to thank both of the panelists for their time and their energy, and for contributing all the knowledge. And I'd like to take the time to thank everybody who tuned in to watch this panel. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys.